everyone. We're going to get started here. Welcome to the WITI Summit 2012. We're excited to be the first session on the schedule. It's the Mobile Development Workshop. I think this is the first workshop WITI's had. Yes, so it's a little bit of a new format. We're going to try some things out. Hopefully you're kind of be open to going with the flow with us. Before I get started, I wanted to kind of gauge interest level in regards to the different areas that we're going to be covering here. So just with a show of hands, who's interested? And we're talking about the nitty-gritty details here, not just like at a high level, because we're going to get that. But the deep technical discussion of mobile apps, app development. Okay, and API development? Few of the same people. How about responsive design? Okay, and how about just kind of mobile product questions? All right, pretty even disbursement. Okay, so I think what we're going to try and do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a mobile overview, give you a little bit of the product perspective, and then we're going to go to each one of our experts. They're going to give you an overview on their area of expertise. And then we're going to break out into smaller groups based on interest area. And at that point, you'll be able to sit down with the experts and really ask them those burning questions that you have. And they can go deep. These guys are good. So you can like ask code questions. You can ask like hardcore performance questions. You know, so they're ready for that. So we'll do that for about 45 minutes, then we'll come back around as a group and we can ask any more general questions and kind of sum up. So with that, I am Amanda McConnell. I'm the head of product for rent.com. What does that have to do with mobile? So if you're in technology today, you're in mobile. There's just no getting around it. It's here, it's going to stay, and it's going to grow exponentially. So about 42% of all mobile users in the US are smartphone users. And these are from December of 2012, so not that long ago, but I happen to know that Bess has some more recent slides, and you'll be amazed at how the numbers have changed even in the 5 months between my slides and her slides. So keep that in mind as we kind of continue through the session. Almost 50% of all mobile users, not just smartphone users, but all mobile users, have used an app and a mobile browser. And tablets. Crazy tablet growth. So 40 million tablet subscribers in 2 years, which is 3.5 times faster the rate of adoption than smartphones. That's a huge game changer. And as of December 2012, 8.2% of all internet traffic came from a mobile device. And I'm going to give away one of Bess's slides. As of May 2012, so as of earlier last month, it's up to 10%. 25% growth in 5 months. So you can imagine the exponential growth that we're going to be seeing in the next few years. And there's all types of projections about when mobile traffic and desktop traffic is going to intercede. And we're kind of looking anywhere from 2014 to 2016 is when most of the projections are.
But in India, it happens now.
Yes. But in India, right now, mobile internet traffic is already equal, if not greater, than desktop internet traffic. So what does this mean for your company? So I started my position at rent.com pretty recently, and I thought since this is a workshop, I'll take you through the process that I went through with them to determine their mobile strategy. So first thing you have to do is assess your mobile landscape. What percentage of your traffic is mobile? And I mean mobile apps, mobile web. If you don't have a WAP site, then how much of the traffic to your regular site is happening on mobile devices? Super critical to figure out. How do users get to your site? Do you do a lot of marketing and advertising, so there's a lot of direct traffic? Do you get it mainly from search, referring sites, social websites? Mostly from email? These are all questions that you need to answer. What about apps? Do you have apps? If you have apps, how are they performing? Are they doing what you want them to do? And these are going to change for every business, right? But this is for a major internet website. Certainly, if you already have an existing website, these are going to be applicable. If you are doing a startup and it's an app-based startup, some of these might not apply, but certainly things that you're going to want to think about. And what do your key metrics look like on mobile devices? And that's the same as before. So how are your key metrics performing in your apps? How are they performing on mobile traffic? And how are they performing on your website? So where do you go to get these questions answered? Data. If you can't answer these questions, you're going to have a really hard time figuring out a solid mobile strategy. So I'm going to talk you through some of the numbers for rent.com so you can kind of get a feel for what I mean and what those numbers might look like. So for us, we get about 10 million visitors a month. About 21% of that traffic is on mobile devices. Of that, 49% is coming from Android, 31% are coming from iPhones, and 17% from iPads. And that's actually pretty on par with the national average of devices. The 21% of our total mobile traffic is about 2 times. So we know that as mobile traffic overall grows, that our traffic will probably go at about double the rate of that. So how do users get to our site? 84% of our traffic comes from search engine or referring websites, which means about 84% comes from areas that we cannot control. So that's just something to keep in mind. Apps. So we actually have 3 apps. We have an iPhone, Android, and a BlackBerry. I'm not going to worry too much about our BlackBerry because we're only, most of our traffic is in the US, not in Canada. So we're probably going to just let that one ride it out. But of our iPhone, we get 315,000 downloads total. It's been out about a year and a half. And we have a 2.5 rating. So it's all right. It's not great. We have 200,000 Android downloads, also with a 2.5 rating. So at least they're equal. And our apps, for our key KPI, we have one that's like super, super important to us. It drives all of our revenue. And for that, our apps convert at about 60% of how they convert on our main site. So not fantastic, not where we would want it to be. So now that I have the information, time to determine the mobile strategy. So if you don't have apps, you're going to probably need to get some. I can't even imagine a scenario nowadays where you wouldn't need an app. You guys might have some. Certainly Patty might throw some at you. But overall, at least like a cookie cutter, some presence you want to have in the App Store. And if you do already have apps, how are they performing? Are they doing what you want them to do? And this is the key part, the API. Does your API support all the features and functionality that you need in your apps? I cannot stress the importance of the API in app development. And it's always the last thing that people think about, and I guarantee you it'll be the thing that kicks you in the butt when you're trying to build an app. Because invariably there's something that you want in the app and your API doesn't support it. So super critical. How are you going to address your mobile web traffic? So is the traffic something that you can control? Is it coming mainly from emails? We talked about advertising campaigns. Can you drive people directly to your apps? Or is it coming from search? In which case, if they come on a mobile device, you could direct them to an app, but there's breakage there, right? So you might want them to go to a website. You might want them to go to a WAP site. You might want a responsive site. So you have to think about how you want to control that traffic. And finally, how many resources can you dedicate to your mobile efforts? So again, looking at these from the perspective of rent.com, we have apps, traffic's decent, but they're not performing the way we want. So number one thing is we have to optimize our conversion on our apps. Number one, iterate until we get it to at least on par with our main site. We have to fix bugs. We have bugs. That's why we have a 2.5 rating. Fix the bugs. And we know that we're missing some key features that we're getting hit for in the ratings. So those need to get out there. Once we've done all that, we can feel perfectly comfortable driving traffic to our apps. But we don't want to drive it before that because we know we're not converting traffic the way we want it to. So on our API side, we have about 75% coverage of our API to the features that we want in our apps. So we have some work there. And we have two audiences. We have a consumer audience, and then we have a client audience. On our client side, zero coverage. So that's obviously a phase 2. Because we get so much traffic from search, we know 100% we have to have a highly optimized mobile web presence. And looking at the fourth point, we have limited resources. We wish we could hire as many people as we want to maintain a separate mobile website and our main site and our apps, but it's just not the reality. So we need to look at doing a responsive site. So what do you do now? Bring on the experts. So for us, and hopefully for you, you have experts within your company that you can go to with the strategy and help you flesh it out. You can also look to outside contractors and agencies. Luckily for us, and the reason that we have these people sitting here, this is like the dream team of experts if you want to build a mobile app, or not just an app, a mobile presence. So with that, I'm going to pass you along to Bas, who's the founding partner and mobile architect of Archimedes Labs, and she is like a rock star in the mobile app dev space.
Am I good? Can everyone hear me? Or should I use this mic? I'm good? I need to adjust. Is it better? Actually, lower is better. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Amanda, for inviting me and introducing me. I actually are working on a new ebook. It's all about celebrating women. So I hope that you will reach out to me if you're interested in investing or getting funding and targeting a woman. I'm trying to build a network resources for all the women out there. I also contribute a Twitter API developer book released last summer. I'm part of an incubator, Archimedes Lab. We invest in a seed stage startup. And one of our portfolio company, Gita, was featured at TechCrunch Disrupt just 2 weeks ago in New York. I'm also a startup advisor for Eligible. They just got into a YC Combinator dispatch. And Nunabak, is also won the Demo God Award from Demo Show. And Aftership was, also a winner at the Global Startup Battle. I also, working on the workshop and trying to, get more women to expose to technology. So I hope that, you will follow me so that you can get the updates. Mobile first, web second. Where it come from? Fred Wilson, it happened in 2010, and now it become a phenomenon. if you look at the most recognizable company that is a good example of mobile first is Twitter and Foursquare. Back then, Twitter is all about mobile. And 46% of Twitter active users are using mobile regularly. And you can actually follow someone using text message. Foursquare, they barely have a website. They barely have a web app. All the activity, all the tracking is based on mobile. Look at the traffic. You see, the growth of mobile is, going like that exponentially, and get to a point where, the mobile traffic is reaching the same size as internet and, crossing. So this is really important. This is the tipping point. If you look at the e-commerce compared to m-commerce, you will see, more, money on commerce are moving, from E to M. And another trend is you will see more people are consuming iPad, and you can see that iPad, the consumption and the purchase are exceeding, iPhone compared to iPad. So you can see, 29% of adults are owning a tablet. So it's going to be a changing, the way that we consume and use, device. Let's look at the data. 17.4 million tablets shipped worldwide just, first quarter this year. 34 million tablets. It generates 3.4 more traffic than smartphone. By 2016, tablet is 10% of global mobile data traffic. 68% are iPad. If you actually zoom in, what I want to show you is how important tablet, iPad become compared to all other devices. So number of devices also exceeding number of worldwide population by 2013. Means that, we used to have one car for the family, and now we have, multiple cars in a household. TV set, the same thing. Now, each person will have more than one device. These are the trend. When you have so many devices, per person, more data, more connectivity, more bandwidth. What happened? You can see, it happened across, the world, not just U.S., but Latin, Asia. 52% of the mobile traffic is coming from video, and video is the top activity for mobile user. By 2016, 70% of mobile traffic will be video. So, these are the trends that you need to pay attention as if you are going after mobile. You have to understand the audience. And YouTube is the largest source of mobile web traffic, all the way to 25%. And next popular, is Netflix and Pandora, on, media consumption. Now, comes to mobile monetization. The biggest mistake is you treat web the same as mobile. So the popular business model that has been floating around, is like freemium business model. You have a free app, then you have a pay app. So let's look at the outcome. So if you have a free app, you can actually use in-app purchase, or you can actually have a pay app. And most of the app is on, there's like 56% are pay app, but the app sell average is about 377 per app. But then, if you look at free app, how do you monetize it? Is it advertising? No, people are finding, in-app purchase, you can actually make $14 on it. 30% of the iOS revenue come from in-app purchase in 2010. 34 of top 10, 100 grossing apps are free apps, and they are monetized, by in-app purchase. You can see, I quote an example that, there's a game company make $10 million in 2011, and 40% plus is coming from in-app purchase. It's huge. Every transaction in-app purchase is $14. It doesn't matter, iOS and Android. And Apple has make in-app purchase, and they make the experience much better, and company are more smarter on how to use it, so it increased, and 14 times like size of the freemium model. 51% of revenues come from in-app purchase, from transaction of over $20, and people are willing to pay that much. And out of that 51%, 30% of that group is coming from 50 plus, transaction. People are willing to pay when they pay. Spending is a habit. 56% of the game players spend $1. They will come back again and spend, again. And 25% of those people who pay will come back and spend 3 or more times. So it's a habit. Once you spend it, once you get them to pay the first $1, very likely they will come back and pay again and again and again. So are all users same? No. You want someone to be loyal. You want to go after the loyal user. Loyal is gold, 20 to 1%. Loyal purchaser, is equal to 20 one-time purchaser. And top purchaser is equal to 100 times, loyal purchaser. So it really, worthwhile to go after that, top purchaser. 80 to 90% of profit come from that 0.5% user. So you can see, the in-app purchase revenue compared to the advertising revenue. So if you have a startup and you're trying to work on your business model, think about this. Do you just think about advertising? You should open up your mind. Look at this great example. Flower Garden is a mobile game app, and they are showing before they implement in-app purchase and after. You can see, it's significant. So again, you can go freemium, free and premium pay app, free and work on advertising, or you can actually consider in-app purchase. Another big mistake, don't treat iPhone like iPad. So on anything, like, from concept, product design to implementation, people are not using, the device the same way. iPhone, every session is about 2 to 3 sessions, 2 to 3 minutes per session. iPad is a consumption app. People spend, at least more than half an hour on iPad. And iPad was mostly, used at home or office, and a lot of merchants are using iPad. So don't, try to, make the iPhone app bigger and turn it into an app. Another big trend is all about paying. You can see that, these are the 4 big trends, like paying bills, buying tickets, buying goods, and interactive marketing before you purchase. So you can see that, how the mobile user are becoming more sophisticated. Before, they were using app, for like, little fun app here and there. But now, when they are accustomed to mobile, they are using it, on more personal items, regular items like buying. Now, about mobile strategy, after we learning all these, statistics and trends, early days, we usually have two buckets, native app and mobile web app. And now, with this, mobile first movement, basically we have a native app embedded with the web app. And Fat Wilson basically app design should be mobile first and web second. And there's another trend that, now people actually will try to learn from the mobile design and translate back to the web design and simplify everything. Don't make it everything so complicated. And people are used to, mobile, app and, the design. And, also, Facebook, like the head of design, he always, said that now, within Facebook, everything within Facebook, when they do anything, they always think design mobile first. It's always mobile first. So the Facebook CTO, he got a big problem when he first started. There's like that many, device. And now, the solution is, moving to HTML5 and, to use, those to unify, the device. You can see that, all the, the percentage, across, all the phones and tablets. And it's really complicated if you're trying to, cover so many devices. Strategy one is to just go native, but then you can also use a UI web view and use that to support the iOS SDK and sending the data back and forth. Strategy two, and you can use a HTML5 framework, and it's cross-platform and it compile into native. Another strategy is to actually use another, cross-platform framework in different language and, just compile into native app. Another mistake, people treat, MySQL same as NoSQL. I hope that, I won't talk over your head, So MySQL is a database, and it's relation database. And NoSQL basically will not allow you to use join. It's flat file. And it doesn't have all those rigid database rules. And it's distributed fault tolerance architect and scale horizontally. If you actually plan for a high growth mobile strategy, for your company, and you think that it has to support a lot of people, in the mobile, think about, nowadays, the traffic on mobile is growing really fast. It's not just the same way like mobile, and you will see a lot more news, like, the startup, they will gain 1 million users in like 1 month. And I think, there's an app. They roll out to Android. They already have an iOS audience, but when they enroll in Android, they got 1 million in 1 day. So again, mobile, you have to think, scaling. NoSQL, the most popular choice is MongoDB and Hadoop. Another mistake. People treat server-side framework the same as server-side API. Rails is a really cool CMS, and it's very good for content, creating web app on the fly, and you have Drupal and Groomer, and you have all these framework. But all these framework is really it was designed for web. But mobile is very different, and if you want to actually support, the type of high growth curve on mobile, and you have to scale so quickly, and you have so many people connect to it, simultaneously, then you have to think about how you can go lower, which is, the I/O level, on the server, there's several layers, and the IO level is the lowest, and the most popular choice is like Node.js, and it's non-blocking, asynchronous, and it's event-driven, so it responds really quick, and you can use JavaScript to write the entire stack. So these are the like the trends in mobile. Another mistake people make is like they thinking, the architecture is the same for thin client and thick cloud. And you have like thick client, thin cloud. So what's a good example of thin client and thick cloud? Facebook. Facebook have everything, stored on, centralized, thick cloud. But guess what? Even Facebook, realized that, this is not the way to go because, Facebook has been saying that mobile is the first priority, and they purchase, Instagram, and they picking up, more, startup that focus on mobile. And also, there's rumors that, Facebook has to actually go into the mobile manufacturing business. Means that, Facebook will work on their own mobile. So again, there's a big shift, that you have to think about, shifting a lot of the work on the device, and use the cloud to connect, all these, devices together. So at Communities Lab, we focus on social, mobile, and consumer. And this is how you reach me. You can follow me on Twitter. And I know that I go through the slide very quickly, and you can find my slide here. Oh, I didn't time it, sorry.
All right, so, uh-oh, this is off a little bit, but sorry, can you hear me? So that was awesome, Beth. I think our heads are all like a little overload, but squish it all over, make some room. She kind of set up our next expert pretty well, I think, on the importance of APIs. You might have noticed with all of those development strategy slides, there was a little API component there. And so to talk more about that is Ketan and Jarya.
Oh, wait.
Oh, no. How did we get...
We'll
Sorry
get
about that.
We'll get that set up in a second. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. Focus on him. I'm just going to...
We're going to do some setup. So I just want to do a quick survey. How many of you are developers in the audience? Okay. How many of you are product managers or in charge of what you're going to be doing for your mobile apps? Okay, all right. And how many of you are executives who are really trying to align your company with mobile? Okay, good. All right, so I know that a little bit better. My name is Ketan and Jarya. I'm the founder of CardSlick, which will be up there soon enough. And CardSlick is an app that lets you create and share digital business cards. We're a 500 startups company recently. We won the TechCrunch Audience Choice Award. And it's a very obviously focused on mobile product as iOS and the upcoming Android app.
Sorry, give me 1 second, so sorry.
So how many of you have ever worked with an API or know what API is? Okay, good. So for those of you that don't, API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's basically the way two different technologies can talk to each other. And the technologies in question right now is if you have a mobile app, which looks like an iOS or Android app, how does it talk to your server to get to the data it needs, right? There's also other kinds of APIs, right? If you're an iPhone developer, you're working with the iPhone SDK APIs to build your app, right? In particular light of mobile.
Sorry.
It's okay.
A little copy and paste error going on here.
That's fine. Should we just go to SlideShare? Can we just go to SlideShare?
So that I have to get connected.
Oh, okay. All right. I have awesome slides, I swear.
He does. They're killer.
So what's really important in an API is that as an API developer, you're providing data for people to consume, right? It's like you're writing a good book. And a good book has to have the right meat in order for people to make use of it, right? So let's say you're building a contacts app, right? Your API has to list, here's all my contacts. but it can't give every bit of information on every call, right? Because it has to be performant. We all know that mobile is not as fast as we want it to be. You know, even with the prevalence of 4G and 3G networks, data doesn't come as fast as you want. So part of designing a good API means, let me give you only data you need and not much more, right? The other thing about API development is that it's got to make sense, right? When you're designing your API, oh, there we go, almost there.
Almost there.
Okay. Can we, yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Okay. One more second and we'll have it, I swear.
I didn't say that's so pretty I'm working on this at all, I swear.
All right. Are you okay doing it in preview?
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Can I still do the thing?
I don't know if that'll work.
Okay, that's fine. Let's just switch over and we'll
Is that
take it from
cool?
there. Yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
All right. So sorry. That was all me. All right.
Okay, we back in business?
Not quite, apparently.
Yay! All right, good, good, good.
Yay.
Let
All right.
me hide this little, yeah, content on, there we go. Turn this toolbar off. Anyway, that's good enough, right? That works? Oh, look, there's me. Okay. Where was I? I have to get back on track. Okay, so we clear on what APIs are used for? Good. So almost every app that you use on your phone is working with some sort of API, right? And let's go into the next slide. Most of those APIs are transferring data, and they're using different formats. Years ago, when people had web services and so forth like that, there was XML and like that. These days, there's only one answer, and that's JSON. Right? JSON is JavaScript object notation format. It's basically a simple way of defining data. It's very universal. It works both on server and front end. Almost every kind of app or SDK understands JSON. So if people ask you, hey, how should we do our API? What's the format? JSON. It's just that simple. And you want to keep it simple, right? Simple is about how your app accesses the data, right? There's a very standard, if you're developers, you know this, REST as a metaphor for accessing your data. REST stands for representational state transfer. What it really means is, let's say you have an object like a contact, right? You can do a few things with a contact. You can say a create action, right? Let's create the contact, right? The other action is an update action. Let's just change the phone number, right? The other one action is a read action, right? Let's get the information for this particular contact. And the last action is the delete action, right? So what we call a CRUD interface is usually what you use on your REST APIs. Those are kind of basic for almost everything you use. Like if you're using Facebook, you're using our app, other apps, you're doing one of those kinds of actions. Generally, keeping with this REST API is really important because other developers will understand what you're doing. The one thing to think about with APIs, you might be building it for yourself right now, but in the future, someone else is going to be using this. We used to work with Twitter in my previous lifetime, and we worked on their API, and Twitter got really famous because they made an awesome API that let all these millions of developers make these really cool things. So if you have a good set of data that people are interested in, and you provide a good API, you can see your usage of your app go up from that. Not just your app, your website, whatever kind of data you have. What's really important in APIs is somehow securing it, right? There's a lot of different techniques you can use to secure your API, but it really matters if you're talking for the user. Let's say like you're in the Facebook app or your own app and you have a user account. You want to make sure that other people can't do things with that user account, right? There's a lot of different options, but the easiest one I would say is what's called a token. A token basically means it's like a key that only the app and the client know to communicate the key together and say, hey, do you have access to this data? Yes, you do? Okay, proceed to the next step. OAuth is something that's used very common, but depending on where you are with your technology stack, unless you have, let's say, 3x or 3 times more external developers than internal developers, OAuth is usually not even needed, right? I mean, the bigger companies like Twitter and Facebook are using it, obviously. OAuth, but basically what it does, prevents that if you're signing up for a service and you're letting another app use that data, you're not sending your password or credentials to that other service. You're using a secure manner of getting that across. Okay. Is this all on track? Are we good? Okay, good. An API means forever, right? So if you make an API, let's say you have a call that says contact / update ID 1. Let's say that's a typical URL you'll use. or what's called an endpoint. That's around forever, because once you have a client that's consuming that data in that format with that endpoint, it's very hard to tell all your developers, hey, sorry, we're moving that now to, contacts underscore whatever, right? It means when you make an API and you publicize it and people are using it, you have to be very careful, because it's really hard to make those changes in the future to say you can't do that. Twitter had a lot of problems with this in the beginning as they were changing their API policy. Facebook is notorious for changing API calls out even while you're using the app. And you'll find bugs in your app. You're like, wait, we don't have images. Why don't we have images? It's because Facebook made a change and didn't tell anybody. Why would they do that? I don't know. So to deal with those kind of things, you version your API. And that's really important. So versioning your API basically means a different endpoint that has like a version number. Well, there's actually multiple ways of versioning. The simplest one is doing a URL where it says like API/v1 contacts, right? That means if you're subscribing to the v1 API, you're going to use that URL. But let's say you might want to make a change, and v2 has got these awesome new widgets and features, and now you can, make rice with it. I don't know. But you're going to say API/v2. And that means what's important is that all your clients that are using the v1 API, they don't get affected, which is extremely important. What the last thing you want is a client that you made 2 years ago, or one of your partners made a client, all of a sudden stop working because you added the new rice-making feature. So versioning your endpoints is really important. The other way of versioning endpoints is doing it through the URL header. This is a better developer way of doing it, but we can talk more offline about that kind of stuff. But not only do you need to version your server API calls, you need to version your clients, right? So let's say you make an app with 1.0, and 1.0, the app is making certain calls, right? But let's say in 1.5 version of the app, you're actually changing the way you make calls. So what we do in our app development is every time an app is requesting data from the API, it actually passes the app version to the API. It says, hey, I'm app version 1.0, here's the data I want. Sometimes as you grow, you'll find API development, just like writing a book, is not perfect from the first edition. You're going to make changes, so sometimes on the server you have to do little hacks to say, hey, if it's client version 1.04, do this. If it's 1.05, do this. Now you don't want that in general, but you need to support it because sometimes as you grow, you make mistakes, right? So you have to both version your clients and pass this parameters along and make sure you handle those special cases. And the problem is that no one gets these things right from the get-go. And unless you're like a company like Facebook or Twitter where you have this huge developer group, it's really hard to broadcast those changes out to the world. So just be prepared on your server end and your developers to hate you by saying, hey, sorry, we got to make this change and now we're going to break this stuff. Well, hold on, we have to make an exception, right? That's why APIs need forever. All right, so on the client side. Client side, I usually mean mobile apps right now, right? iOS, Android, BlackBerry, I guess WebOS is gone now, unfortunately. I don't know what they're doing with it. But so what really makes this stuff kind of easy is that you have a single class for accessing your API. Normally, let's say it's like a card click API, you'll say card click private, right? You'll write that in your Objective-C code or your Java code. And anytime your app is saying, hey, I want to talk to the server, that's the class you'll use, right? You keep it in one place, you match the modeling that you have on the server with the client, and that way your developers don't have to deal with multiple classes and dealing with multiple things. They go, hey, how do I get this data? Go to the client class. How do I get this information? Go to the client class. And documentation becomes easier because it's just in one place. I would really, really strongly recommend don't do API calls in your different places, right? Make them in one place. It's much easier to debug, much easier to track. You want to prepare for long load times, right? 3G isn't that 3G. Images don't load that fast. Unless you have what's a CDN that helps you get these images out there, your app is not going to be that fast. Sorry, it's just the way it is. Because the internet on mobile still isn't as fast as we'd like it to be. So prepare for that. That means your app has to be responsive to say to the user, hey, here's what's going on, right? Now, no one wants to see a long loading bar or all these kinds of waits and delays. So, you know what? Distract them, right? Make something interesting for them to see. This is all familiar to any of you who were around in the Flash days where, Flash preloaded became its own art form, Similar, you can do on mobile. Like, one thing we see very commonly is instead of just saying loading, it says, making sandwiches, getting data points. Like, just use something to distract the user and make it feel faster than it actually is. And animation is a very useful tool for this. You can animate things in and out to say, hey, we're doing something, right? Perception matters a lot more on client sometimes than actuality. Like I said, show loading status UI. This one's really important because a lot of apps forget to do that, and they just rely on that little circle in the top left, right? People don't look at that anymore. I mean, the only time I look at that little circle is when things are not working. So your UI actually has to take into account, hey, what is the app doing? And like when you have a single API client class, what you can do is that you can say, I'm loading, tell my app I'm loading, and do the animation you need to do. It's all in one place. Makes it a lot easier. Caching. Caching is extremely important. So if you're familiar with core data on iOS, I'm not familiar with the Java side, but if you're familiar with any kind of caching tools on that, you want to cache your data. You want to cache your models that are coming back and forth, images especially. And what's key about this is updating cache when you need to update it in the app. For most UIs, images are probably going to be the most time-consuming thing, and that's what you have to deal with. But use a CDN, right? You partner with Akamai or Amazon or Rackspace to be able to provide what's called edge locations of your data so that you can get that stuff anywhere in the world really quickly. And one thing I will say, most apps are global these days, right? It's very hard to make an app that only works in one place. And it's much better to have a global app. The one thing to think about is not just data access in America, but like in Europe, in Asia, all these different places where the technology might not work the same. Some places actually faster, like Singapore has got amazing internet speeds, right? But other places might not have it. On the server end, this is one of the biggest pains. You want to sync your server releases with your app releases. What that means is, let's say you have 1.0 of your app and you have 1.0 of your server backend. And when the Apple processor, what happens is you beg and borrow and plead and say, hey, here's a new version of our app, please let it out in time. Well, what will happen is they'll take longer than you want them to take. You have to have your architecture set up so that you can say, when the App Store releases my app, let me release a server at the same time, right? Because you can break things that way. So your backend has to be set up in such a way where you can say, hey, I can make this release happen at the time I want. I can also roll back that release if I need to, or make hot fixes. Because the real problem is a lot of times you don't even have control. Let's say you release version 1.5. Doesn't mean the rest of the world got 1.5 the second Apple said it's out, right? Or Android, you don't have this problem as much. But you're going to have to live with both 1.0 and 1.5 being out in the market at the same time, right? There's no such thing as sunsetting appliance these days. It's very hard to do that. That's one problem with native versus all web mobile apps is that native, you have to support older versions. So when you do deployments, deal with the fact that your server has to do both things, right? And this is a headache for everybody. We still have that headache every time we're releasing a new version. So what we do is we test, right? So we'll release, or we'll have a staging server, deployment server, or development server, where we'll have the older version of the app, and we'll test that with the newer version of the backend. Is everything still working? Is nothing's broken, right? And full regression, all the features, top to bottom, get your QA team on that. That's extremely important. Because what you don't want is releasing a new version of your server and your current version of your app breaks. This is extremely common. It happens to a lot of people. The opposite is also true, right? You really have a new version of your app and your server hasn't been updated yet on your production side. You want to make sure it still works. Now sometimes on the app side, that's a little bit harder to do. You have to sync releases at the same time. But I would always caution, test as much as possible on the various versions that you're using. There we go. Documentation, everyone's favorite part. Write every single thing down, even notes that you have with your client colleagues, and say, hey, wait, we have to add this parameter to make sure that we don't forget to do this thing. I'm as guilty as anybody of not documenting everything. The problem is everyone forgets stuff, right? And I would say the companies that do really well with getting their API usage is companies like Twitter, who has amazing documentation there. If you want to see a good example, go to developer.twitter.com and look at that code examples there and the documentation. It's phenomenal. They go over in detail everything. Facebook's gotten much better, even though things change pretty quickly. Foursquare is actually pretty good. Instagram's getting better. Actually, Instagram with the brand new version of API has got phenomenal documentation. They actually let you test the API on the web itself so you can figure out what you're doing. Examples are much better than just long, winded streams of here's how you do stuff. Actually put code examples. If you want to get this data, here's the code in this language. If you want to get this data in this other language, here's the code. It's much more useful. Getting uptake on your API usually means developers are excited about your app. When developers are excited about your app, it's good for you. Also put links in that code examples, right? Like, here's a link to the endpoint that gives you this data. Let your API be accessible from the web so people can see the raw data there. Revise, because your docs are going to suck, right? It's just going to be really hard to keep them updated. It's very hard to remember this. We make that as part of the release cycle, right? We actually are not released until the docs for the API are updated. And we're getting more stringent about that, but I would caution you guys to keep that in mind. Because reality is, without good docs, you're gonna potentially hire a developer, and they're gonna say, "How the hell do I do this? I don't know." And you're gonna say, "Well, we had this guy a few months ago that wrote something. I don't really know, right?" And that's happened to everybody. It happens to everybody. So document the hell out of any kind of API calls that you're making, and that's really what's key. And that's it. Oh, well, one last thing. We have some shirts for card flakes, and come find me afterwards. And we have a few left, and we'll happy share them. All right, thank you.
Awesome. So does everyone have like fully versioned, documented APIs that are ready to go? Totally. You're going to go back and hand Kenton slides to your tech team on Monday, or Wednesday, as the case may be. I know that's what we'll probably do at Rent. So learned about mobile apps, learned about APIs. Next key factor in getting your mobile web presence ready, at least for us at Rent, a lot of other people out there, is a responsive design. So I'll let Patty give you the details on that. But Patty Tolan from Filament Group.
Hello. Can you hear me? You can hear. I can hear me. That is loud enough? Okay. All right. So just quick show of hands. Who in the room is familiar with responsive web design, if anyone? Excellent. And I'm going to actually come at this from a slightly different take than, that's okay. Get back to my, okay. So we come at this from a slightly different, actually very sort of simpatico, but slightly different approach than Bess and Ketan. We are, so I am a partner at Filament Group, and we are a front-end design and development company. So we do web design, we do development, and we come at the user experience side. So all of the back-end intelligence that we're talking about here definitely meets up where we meet, but we're much more focused on the design and the user experience. Now, designers in the room and front-end developers, any? Yeah? Okay. So we're really focused on designing engaging sites and applications that are really simple to use and accessible. We're the authors of Designing with Progressive Enhancement. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that term, but it's a big foundational part of responsive design. And we also do a lot of blogging. We release a lot of code to open source and open source libraries, including the jQuery project. Our goal is to develop engaging experiences that are inclusive, meaning that they're sites that work everywhere and for everyone. So we started coming at mobile design really focused on accessibility, and I don't know if that's a concern. That is a concern, and it should be a concern for everyone, right? You want to make sure that your content gets to everyone and works well everywhere. So this is actually an old data point. I think Bess's data is newer, but I think it's interesting to note that today, the new data is that there are 6.1 billion active mobile subscriptions in the world and 7.01 billion people. So it's not a direct one-to-one, obviously, but 87% of the population has a mobile subscription, and that doesn't even count all the tablets that people don't have a subscription for because they're piggybacking on their home networks. Of all those billions of mobile devices, there's a huge diversity, and they really aren't all iPhones. So in the past so we've been working for about 8 or 9 years, and for the past 5, working on trying to help people think about mobile. In the past 2 years especially, we've been seeing some really interesting insights. My screen is not showing. That people, when they're thinking about mobile development, they're thinking about the basic desktop, they're thinking about iPhones, and they're thinking about iPads. Yeah. What's that? Okay. So. Oh, okay. Try that. Is that better? I'm noticing that my slides are not actually showing fully on the screen, but that might be okay. Anyhow, so one of the interesting discoveries we've been making lately is when people are thinking about designing their mobile presence, they're thinking about mobile, meaning the iPhone primarily, and then iPad for tablet, and then desktop at 1024 and 1280. Those are sort of the standards they have in their head. But what's really happening out in the world, the screen sizes people are really using, they've got these, your iPads, they've got a bunch of different e-readers, BlackBerry phones and tablets, and then this is really what's happening. Android phones and tablets follow all those sizes, and then we've got extended desktop and web TV. So this is a conservative view of our viewport universe, right? This is what, if you really want to get everyone, these are all the screen sizes that you need to be able to accommodate. And they also have different capabilities, right? So I don't know if everybody knows this, but there are lots of mobile phones that don't have touchscreens, right? Lots of the older and even the newer BlackBerries, they use directional keypads, they use arrow keys. There are lots of desktop browsers that are currently shipping with touch capability, even though your screen doesn't have touch capability. So the browser thinks that it can deal with touch. So there's a lot of technical capabilities that you sort of need to be thinking about that may not be immediately obvious. Well, this is, if you had to design an application for every size here, that's an enormous challenge, right? So we do design for a lot of different clients, and they're from different industries, and we hear people saying a lot, like, I want my content to be everywhere. This is a hard challenge to focus on. So what we started getting involved in is responsive web design. We worked on the bostonglobe.com site. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, but this is the actual website. These are photographs of the actual website. This is a single code base. This is the same website working on all those devices. This is what responsive web design is about. It's about figuring out a way to think about your code from a simplest mobile-first approach and then using the progressive enhancement to expand and enhance the site for each device based on its capabilities. We've also been working, I don't know if anyone is a front-end web developer, but we've been working on the jQuery mobile framework. And this is an open source project where we develop code and components that are coded based on semantic HTML, and then they're used to enhance, and they're tested for basically every mobile platform. So we've got a sort of a breakpoint of probably 5 different levels of mobile capability, and the framework itself builds in an understanding of capabilities of different devices and delivers only the code that will work on those devices. So it's responsively looking at the way transitions work properly, and it will deliver only the transitions that are capable for each device. And it's got a little framework where basically what it does is it goes out and it uses, so the big idea that we are working on, and it's a really moving target, but an interesting evolving moving target, is to figure out a way to do a single code base that will work on all platforms. So the key principles to responsive web design are starting with, not in the design process, but in the development process, a mobile-first, progressive enhancement-based markup. And does anybody here know what progressive enhancement means? Is anyone familiar with it? So the idea with progressive enhancement is that you start your website with semantic HTML only, because it's the thing that works everywhere, right? Semantic markup will work on the little screen on your refrigerator. It will work anywhere that has a browser will understand HTML. So the first principle is to make sure that the first thing you deliver is always semantic markup. Don't worry about anything else. There are many devices that won't deal with simple CSS. They won't deal with JavaScript. And Amanda was talking about the statistics that they were keeping to understand their mobile traffic. One of the things that I find interesting is we have the data that 40% of people have a smartphone in the US, and I think it's somewhere around 25 to 30% worldwide. Well, that means that 60% people have a feature phone. Those feature phones have browsers. People still are looking to access the web on those devices. Now, the interesting thing about those devices is that because they don't understand JavaScript, many of them, they don't report data back that people have accessed your site using them. So you don't know what your mobile traffic is. You know what the reported mobile traffic is. And many people will access sites on those less feature-capable mobile phones, and they won't return. So what you get is sort of a one-off drop because they don't have a satisfying experience, or because your content is not available to them, or all your features don't work. So one of the things that we think is like every piece of functionality should be delivered as a simple semantic HTML element that works, and that's everything that's essential. So the next thing that we do with responsive web design is we build in a set of flexibility is really key. So if you don't want to have to deal with every breakpoint in that spectrum, what you want to think about is if every individual element is scaled to be 100% of the width of whatever container it's in, then it'll just fit. And we can use media queries, which are part of the CSS spec, to actually ping and ask questions about the device capabilities and then deliver a layout that works best for that device. So what it'll do is you can set a media query that says, if you are smaller than or larger than 600 pixels or a 600 pixel equivalent, manage the layout this way. If you are smaller or larger than 1024, manage that way. You can also use media queries and similar feature tests to test for things like geolocation, to test for flash capability, to test for the screen size can actually be used to deliver different sized images so that you can manage your bandwidth. So if you're delivering to primarily smartphones, so something that's under 480, you don't want to send a Retina image because the size and scale of that will really eat up your bandwidth. So media queries give you a lot of opportunity to do really nice customization of the experience based on device capabilities. And then the fourth key principle is really content strategy and optimization. So you really need to start thinking about what's essential about your site, your content, and then how do you optimize content delivery so that for each device that you're handing to, they're getting the most optimal experience they can get. So as the other panelists have been saying, HTML5, HTML in general, but HTML5 is really moving forward. Web standards are developing new elements all the time. The spec is expanding, and it's really expanding with mobile in mind. And so sticking with HTML first really does give you a great foundation to expand. We also like to make sure that we're always thinking about accessibility. The ARIA spec is part of the HTML specification that is really focused on using data elements to identify key parts of the content on the screen. It's primarily developed for screen readers, for blind people. But so it'll do things like, instead of having something that's just a standard div, it'll say, this is a navigation element, this is a drop-down menu, this is a calendar, this is a slider, this is a range picker. Those identifying keys, they are actually really good for accessibility, but they also give you an opportunity for voiceover on the Mac. Am I oh, sorry. Voiceover on the Mac will read your website aloud to people, right? So the ARIA spec information will actually be read by VoiceOver as well. So sighted readers will get the benefit of that. So one of the other points that we can't stress enough, and it's a really difficult challenge, is to test on real devices. So we have, I think right now, 76 unique devices. And the more devices you get into a mix, we always say, you go into business, go into your cafeteria, get the 10 people who are in a conference room together, have everyone put their phone on the table, and just take and test your devices. Because you find really interesting things. You'll find that different touch screens have different sensitivity and sort of different responsiveness. I don't know, does anybody know the answer to this? What is the actual the pixel equivalent size of a human finger? Apple has determined that it is 44 by 44 pixels. So so when you're thinking about, even for desktop, even for tablet, things like that, you want to make sure that you're giving enough space in your designs for interactions. It doesn't always have to be a button that big, but it needs to be a space big enough that you can sort of make sure that the hit areas don't overlap. But you also start seeing really interesting things. I think this is an interesting fact. Windows Phone 7, many of the Nokia phones that it delivers with have touch screens, but the Windows Phone browser does not support touch events. It actually uses mouse events. So there's some really interesting sort of quirks in the way the different browsers that work on these devices work that influence how development needs to happen. And what we've found that so as we're thinking about developing, if you're thinking about this broadest set of devices, it'll give you some really interesting insights about where things work and where they don't. One of the points that we've been hearing a lot about responsive, there's a little bit of a backlash because people perceive that it is that take your mobile site and stretch it out to be tablet size, and that's really not what we're talking about at all. It also is not a lowest common denominator event. What it really is thinking about your code, thinking about your content and your code in a really modular way, from the simplest to the most complex, and then you sort of overlay logic to think about how each individual piece of content works in a number of different breakpoint frameworks. So if you have the same set of content that had to work on mobile, had to work on a tablet, and had to work on desktop, it's more like we think about responsive as puzzle pieces. So you can take that content and reorient it, and media queries actually let you build a grid system that will let you take that content and lay it side by side in multiple columns. So you're delivering many experiences to each context with a single code base. I think that might be. And so the principles of starting with markup and then layering on features generally works. Some of the real challenges that we're seeing lately that are sort of to be determined in the responsive framework are really around content management systems. Not every content management system is designed to deliver markup. Some of them will deliver, require JavaScript for content to work. So there's some interesting challenges there. The advertising industry, advertising for mobile is a really interesting challenge right now. A lot of advertising, it depends on Flash. Flash doesn't work on most mobile platforms. So there's a really fundamental challenge there. Video and images, similarly, the process of getting video onto a platform that's accessible everywhere is an ongoing challenge. The process of figuring out how to track and how to do monitoring, places like Omniture, they generally, and Google generally do separate tracking for mobile and desktop, and so figuring out a way to unify those, and how do you determine a tablet? Is a tablet desktop or is a tablet mobile? It's sort of in the middle, and there will be more devices that are similarly gray. Those challenges are sort of emerging as the industry thinks about it. Figuring out ways to optimize for bandwidth are a real challenge. I don't know, we were reading some interesting reports when the new iPad came out, that there were people who were sort of, the Retina images were, people had bandwidth-specific data plans, and they were going through all of their bandwidth in 2 or 3 days, whereas they had been using a month's worth before, because the higher res images chew up so much of their capacity. And then internal organizational change, people frequently have separate app and web teams. How do you unify them? How do you help them think about how to sort of solve the problem together? So those are the sort of the things on our radar to try to help figure out how to develop standards for people to think about how to solve these problems in a more mobile-friendly way. And that's me for that.
All right, so time check. Are we going to 3:45? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we had originally intended to. Sorry, let me get this back to the beginning. Fun with slides today. Sorry about that. So we'd originally intended to get into breakout groups. I think with 15 minutes left, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So we'll just do Q&A for the rest of the time. And we will use the mic in the center if you have a question. So, and this question's obviously for any of our experts here. So, questions? Are you okay? We can go right here. Yeah, we can just turn those on. You can share them amongst yourselves.
Yeah. So Patty, that was a great presentation, and so were the others. Question, you mentioned jQuery for HTML5, using that as a framework. What would your comments be with jQuery versus Sencha Touch versus PhoneGap? What are the trends? I mean, what work for, say, iOS as well as Android to get as near a native app experience as possible?
Yeah, so I think I know Sencha is really focused on 3 or 4 platforms. They are not sort of, a lot depends on how many platforms you want to be able to support. One of the points that I think I didn't mention here, but is important to know, is that there are some tools like PhoneGap, which is actually owned by Adobe, that will let you wrap HTML for delivery through app stores. So this doesn't have to be a binary choice. You don't have to choose native app or web. So I would say that Sencha has, I know Sencha is focused on some of the more popular apps. If you want to be able to get to the broadest possible, set, I know well, the jQuery mobile framework, because it's open source, there are a lot of different device teams that are working together to develop them, and so they're getting a little bit more exposure. It depends on who your audience is and how likely it is that you think that audience will know which device they have. You know which device they have. And we've found that jQuery mobile has the broadest accessibility.
So what if you want to reach as broad an audience as possible, meaning target BlackBerry, Android, and Windows, but you want each of them to have as nearly a native app experience so that you can tell between a native Android versus the app you use using a cross-platform?
It's part of that experience is around design, and there's the question of how much you want something to look like native versus look like your brand, right? I do know that the jQuery mobile framework is themable, and you can deliver different themes to different devices if you want. So that it allows for that capability.
I can address from the engineering side, operation, because I'm very involved with startup, and we always look at, burn rate and resources. So about sharing, like sharing, the source code across platform. Sencha code cannot really share with the web. When you write the code for Sencha, it's really, for native. So you cannot borrow the code and support, the mobile web or, like the website. And if you use Titanium, the code is also, for native, and you can't really, take those code and, borrow it and, support other, platform. If you write HTML5 using jQuery, most likely you will be able to actually wrap with, PhoneGap, and also, using the web view and deploy it. So in a way, jQuery mobile is the mobile version of jQuery. It's more flexible, and also, you can share the code base. And there's a new trend coming out. I think it's I think it's Backbone.js. It's JavaScript framework, and I was told that by a mobile architect that it's a more pure JavaScript framework that is even perform better cross-platform, as far as code base.
Just actually, I might have a less popular opinion, but I actually say, learn who your users are and do that platform first. Like, if you have your Google Analytics or whatever and you see 95% of your people are on Android, then make a native Android app and make it rock. Because the problem is resources are an issue, and you can't do everything for everyone in the beginning. And you'll see apps like Instagram who didn't support Android for a long time until they got the iOS experience right. I think it's the right call for them. Certain apps that won't make sense, right? If you need to be cross-platform for certain reasons, it doesn't make sense. But while responsive design is important, I think, for everybody, in terms of code base, there's not a single breakout hit mobile app only. Most of the breakout hits are native apps.
Okay, others? Next question? Anyone else? Still absorbing all the information that came in? Any follow-up points that any of you want to share?
I think I would just like to reiterate Kevin's point, which is a lot does depend on your business, right? It depends on what you're actually developing. So if you have an established business that already exists on the web, and you're a corporation and you want to be able to deliver your web content, or if you have an application that already exists on a desktop platform, it depends on how your audience understands what you are delivering, and so apps versus web versus both.
Right,
I think
right.
is a good point. I think also one of the points is, I don't know, access points is also something that's crucial. It's not as easy to get links to link directly into specific content inside native apps. So if you want something that you want to be able to make viral and make shareable, like news is a really great case. Like news is really hard to do on apps. People want to share news and they want to be able to share specific stories. There are other cases where that will have the benefit of the web over an app, ways a little bit more. So
Yeah,
a
it's
lot of
ki-
it depends on what your business goals are.
It's kind of silly, you can't link to a particular Instagram photo.
Exactly, and that's one of the things where
That's-
if Instagram were on the web, you would be able to share a link to a specific, I mean, a lot of it depends on your business strategy too.
How many people have a mobile strategy in place right now? And how many people are still formulating one? Okay, so maybe we should take it back to a core level. What are your questions on just developing a mobile strategy in general? No?
Yeah, don't be afraid. Also, questions on, oh, here we go.
Where would you go to find out for it? I don't have a mobile app for mine yet, but based on your numbers, your attendance, is there an age range on who's using what kind of phone, something along those lines to gear it more towards that?
So you have a website now?
I have a website. I do not have a mobile app set for it. I make my website as much as possible user-friendly for mobile. I keep my scripts off of it. I don't have Flash on it, you know.
Do you
But-
have Google Analytics?
Do
on
I do
there?
what?
Do you have Google Analytics? on
I
there?
don't have Google Analytics set up yet.
Yeah, so that would be the first step. It's free.
Okay.
Go grab, set up a Google Analytics account, grab the tags. You can just generate tags. And your front-end developer can just drop those in. It should be super easy. If it's not, there's a problem. You might want to talk to the developer.
Okay.
And that'll start generating information on your traffic, and you can look at, it'll give you a breakdown, both, I think, by user agent, which is device, and it should give you screen resolution breakdown as well, right?
And if you want to get addicted to data, Google Analytics now has a real-time feature.
Yeah.
So when you go to that, you can watch people go to your site in real time, what they're doing, where they're going. It's
Yeah.
like
That is so
crack.
dangerous.
It's
Yeah,
awesome.
It is.
click
You
spam
literally,
is
you can
dangerous.
see like
It's really
minute by
I'm not- I'm
minute.
saying- wait, I'm advocating
where
that, sorry,
they
that- you know what I'm
are.
saying.
But,
Yeah.
which, this is amazing as well, but is there anything based on age range? Because like, I know for what my website is getting that my age range is this for
Right.
users. Do we
So are
have
you-
anything along those lines?
Wait, are you asking to capture analytics on mobile for age ranges, or?
No, I'm asking if there's a
General
generalized trend of users. Are more
Oh, like
users
which
in the
users
20s
are-
and 30s using iPads and
Oh, yeah.
iPhones
So
versus
I think
teenagers
the
versus?
ComScore,
Yeah,
the
ComScore is
report,
really
so
great.
that's what I used in my slides was the ComScore, so I have that. I can send it to you.
That would
It's
be
also
great.
available if you just look up ComScore, mobile 2012,
Don't all the cool kids use
Focus.
iPhones?
something like that.
No, all the cool kids use
But
Android right
I'd be
now.
happy to send
Android
that
is
to you.
cool, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
But there's also, very recently, the Wall Street Journal All Things D conference happened last week, and
Right.
Mary Meeker at Kleiner Perkins has a pretty comprehensive presentation that
Yeah.
does some demographic breakdown.
Yeah, I didn't see quite as,
There were
Demographic
maybe 2 or 3 slides. I know that you can,
Yeah.
I know that the
Yeah,
Business
that's for sure.
Insider, businessinsider.com had tweeted a couple of the 12 most important slides from Mary Meeker's presentation about mobile.
Right.
And you can definitely get that.
yep. Anything else? And I was actually just going to say, are there any questions about data? Because that is kind of where a strategy stems from. So that would be my 100% first point. If you do not have data on your website about your users, find a way to get it. Like Google how to get data on my website. Like just that needs to be the place that you start, because everything that you do after that should be dependent on that, on what your user base is doing. So, okay, so we have time for maybe one more question before we wrap up. Yeah, they're recording. We're being recorded. Sorry.
Hi, so if you're developing a website and, when you go to launch, should you be launching your mobile app at the same time, or should it come after that? And then also, if your website is going to have multiple languages on it, does that make a difference when you're trying to launch the website and launching your mobile apps?
How much money do you have?
Do you know a VC that wants to invest?
People ask actually this question very commonly, and I would say it's hard to do any one thing well in the first place. And I also think it's a numbers game. So there's some sort of bajillion number of websites right now. So if you launch a website, you've launched 1 out of 1 bajillion. There's about maybe 500, 600,000 apps. So if you launch an app, you're one of 600,000. That numbers game sounds better to me. I would recommend to almost anyone, if you're not thinking mobile first and you're not thinking mobile app for a product you're about to launch, if your market is in that, then you're going to miss out on just PR and marketing alone because you're mobile or your app now. And third of all, it's easier to compete, right? It's just I'd rather compete with 600,000 people. Well, actually, I would, maybe 10, but you know, depending on what your product is, I would always say if it makes sense for making a mobile app, make a mobile app.
But I would say you should have at least a single web page that features that web app,
Yes.
that mobile app.
Landing
because
pages are
you
everything.
You want the Google juice. So you
Yeah.
want people, when they're looking, they might look in the App Store, but they will
Yeah.
also look online. And a page on your website is something that news organizations can link to and feature. So that's a way to get the viral, and people can tweet. So it's hard to tweet into the App Store. It's easy to tweet to a site that will get a link to the App Store.
And saying mobile to VCs is just like blood raising, like, ooh, you know.
I will actually suggest to launch the web first, then, the mobile, just because, when you launch the web, it takes at least 2 weeks, for the search engine to index your website. And, you get organic, discovery. And that when you release, the mobile app, and depending on how you release it, if you release on, like a corporate account, then, Apple might even, ask for your website. And, there's a lot of things, tied to your web, your domain. And you want to be able to support your mobile user, using, your web. And so you want to use your web to kind of, cross promote your mobile app. So in a way, there's, benefit of going, the web, first, and then doesn't have to be, really like complicated, complex, app, but even a, landing page, a few, simple, web release launch is better than nothing. And I would say, web and then mobile. But when you design something, mobile first.
Actually, you know what? You made a really good point, and I misspoke earlier. When we launched Cardflip last year, one of the first things we did was produce a web page and a video. And all we did was have a beta list. Now, the only way to get rankings in the App Store is the speed of your downloads. It doesn't really matter as much as how many downloads, but when you're trying to get featured in the App Store, the number of downloads in a given period is extremely important. So what you want to do is establish a web page, a great landing page with great design, collect as many email addresses as possible, and then when your app is launched, give it a few days to get it settled in and get all the bugs kinked out, then send thousands of people to the App Store and say, download my app now. You're going to climb the ranks, and once you climb the ranks, those people are going to let other people know, and they're going to keep climbing the ranks. Because the speed of downloads is everything that determines how quickly you rank. And the problem with Apple is, if in the first 2 weeks you're not ranking, you're probably not going to rank for a while. It's very hard with a launched app to have a good success without ranking really quickly.
So that's probably a good argument for making sure that that splash page has some sort of form to gather people's names.
Yes.
So that you can send them a blast email to let them know when it's ready. So that actually is a nice little circular opportunity.
About the mobile app launch, you don't have a second chance. So I always describe launching the mobile app is like your first wedding. Once your wedding is passed, your second wedding, third wedding, doesn't feel the same way. So you want to make your first wedding, impressive and memorable. That's your first chance of your mobile app. Yeah, so following updates, on the iTunes App Store won't really, do much, in helping your growth.
Yeah.
All right, on that note, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. We have. We're short on time. Yeah, I'm sorry, but we will all be available after, I think, and no one has to run anywhere right away. No. Okay, so we'll be
my
here to
third wedding
answer
to go to.
questions after. Our Twitter handles are all here, and I'll also. Let's see. Bess's presentation's already up on SlideShare, as is Ketten's. Patty and I will get ours on there as well, so you'll have those available along with our contact information. And thanks so much to the experts. This is awesome.